Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 997 for March 26th, 2023. Coming up in a few minutes.
I didn't say I was 62 years in the industry. Someone's tracking me just now. Yeah, the thing is, it has never been classed as a job. It's just a way of life for me, you know. I've been born into the industry, so I always say that the day that I waken up and I don't want to go and do this, that's the time I'll decide to give my notice and to retire. But I'm still loving every minute of it.
Dennis Malcolm of Glen Grant unveiled the distillery's oldest permanent release the other night in New York City, the new 21-year-old Glen Grant, and took a few minutes to answer questions posed by listeners in the WhiskyCast community app. Ask the Distiller is coming up later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. I'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and...
What is there to it? What is the parody here?
The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
Hey friends, Gabriel Cardarella here again with Dewar's Scotch Whiskey, and I have to say, Dewar's French Cask Smooth is a double-aged masterpiece, finished in apple brandy cask from Normandy to be unlike anything you've tried before. More in a bit.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
The average college basketball power forward is 6'9", which, according to my rough calculations, is 16.5 times my height. I'll stick to aimlessly pottering around in back gardens.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. Time is running out for Kentucky state lawmakers to pass a bill ending the barrel tax on inventories of maturing whiskey. There are just 2 legislative days left in this year's session, and the state Senate has yet to take action on House Bill 5, which would gradually phase out the barrel tax starting in 2026. The Senate will be in session this Wednesday and Thursday, but if the bill isn't passed by midnight Thursday, it'll have to start the legislative process all over again next year. The U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments Wednesday in the Bad Spaniels dog toy trademark infringement lawsuit. We've reported on this story over the past few months. Brown-Forman is suing VIP Products for making the Bad Spaniels dog toy that closely resembles a bottle of Jack Daniels. VIP Products won an appeals court ruling that the dog toy is an expressive parody that's protected by the First Amendment. But Brown-Forman's lawyers argued before the High Court that it creates consumer confusion and hurts the rights of legitimate trademark holders. Here's an excerpt from the hearing in which Justice Elena Kagan is debating the parody issue with VIP Products lawyer Bennett Carlson.
The parody here, though, is not putting Jack Daniels on a dog toy. There is far more to it. And there is, in this case...
What is there to it? What is the parody here?
The parody?
Yeah.
The parody is...
maybe I just have no sense of humor, but... What's the parody?
The parody is multifold, but the testimony indicates, and it's not been disputed, that the parody is to make fun of marks that take themselves seriously.
Well, you say that, but you make fun of a lot of marks. Doggy Walker, Dos Perros, Smella Arpa, Canine Cola, Mountain Drool. Are all of these companies taking themselves too seriously?
Yeah, yes. In fact, you don't see a parody
just like
as a
soft drinks and liquor companies take themselves too seriously as a class?
I think there are a lot of products that take them too seriously and merchandise. You don't see, for example, something near to my heart, a parody of Woodford Reserve bourbon, because you don't get that building up of an edifice of making them into a cultural icon and reference point.
The court is expected to issue its ruling before the end of this year's session at the end of June. If you want to listen to the entire hearing, we have the audio available in the news section at whiskycast.com. IJW Bourbon has been one of the most secretive companies in Kentucky's bourbon industry in recent years. Company executives never talk to the media, and their large land purchases have been done under the radar. Now, IJW is expanding its operations to Japan. Nikkei Asia reports IJW plans to build a distillery in Chitose on Japan's northern island of Hokkaido. IJW's Japanese subsidiary has acquired a large plot of land near the Chitose airport and plans to start production next year. Pernod Ricard is expanding its portfolio again, this time in the flavored whiskey category. It's acquired a majority stake in Screwball peanut butter flavored whiskey for an undisclosed amount. The deal will allow Screwball to expand distribution outside of North America and the Caribbean. In other news, Ardbeg has unveiled this year's limited edition release. Bizarre BQ comes from 3 different types of barrels, PX sherry casks, double charred oak, and a special extra charred barbecue cask. It'll go on sale at the distillery and in Germany starting next Monday, and will be available worldwide later this year, likely around Isla Festival time at the beginning of June. Scapa Distillery is opening a new tasting room next week on Orkney and is launching a new Distillery Reserve Collection edition, the Scapa 19-year-old PX Hogshead Finish. It's available at the distillery and online to UK residents only for £185 a bottle. Bruichladdich has released 2 new whiskies. The Port Charlotte Isla Barley 2014 uses barley grown on 8 farms within 15 miles of the distillery, and is available in the U.S. with a recommended retail price of $85 a bottle. The second release is more unusual. It's Isla's first rye whiskey, even though it's made with 45% malted barley. Local farmer Andrew Jones started growing rye in 2017 as a cover crop in between barley crops, after Bruichladdich agreed to buy his entire rye crop for making whiskey. It's a single-grain whiskey dubbed the Regeneration Project, and is available through the Bruichladdich website for £125 a bottle. And finally, 2023 marks the 50th anniversary of Secretariat's historic Triple Crown. While Woodford Reserve's annual Kentucky Derby bottle this year features a painting of Secretariat, the family who raised the horse is teaming up with another distillery. The Chenery family is endorsing Ragged Branch Distillery's Secretariat Reserve Bourbon. The Virginia distillery used corn grown on the farm where Secretariat was born to make the 5-year-old bottled in bond whiskey. It'll go on sale April 22nd in Virginia state liquor stores and at the distillery, with limited availability in the Mid-Atlantic region and online. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
I hope you'll take a few minutes this week to download the WhiskyCast community app and join our growing online community of whiskey lovers. There's plenty to talk about, and we're using some of that discussion to help us decide on content for each week's WhiskyCast. The app is free to download from the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events. Tickets are still available for Whiskey and Barrel Night this Thursday in Tampa, Florida, and Whiskey Live London on Saturday, April 1st. This weekend also brings us Clackman and Shire's Whiskey Festival in Scotland, the Croydon Whiskey Festival in London, the Whiskey Festival Rhein-Ruhr in Dusseldorf, Germany, the Vilnius Whiskey Festival in Lithuania, and the Miami Whiskey Mash in South Florida. The Austin Whiskey Riot is coming up on April 8th in Austin, Texas, followed by the Houston Whiskey Riot on the 15th. The Gothenburg Beer and Whiskey Festival is April 14th and 15th in Sweden, and the Nth, the Universal Whiskey Experience, is April 21st and 22nd in Las Vegas. If you're organizing a whiskey event, please let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendar at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
So, in Spain, they call redbreast Petit Roco. It's me, but a touch more exotic, kind of like a Redbreast PX edition, finished in Pedro Jimenez casks, adding a velvety and decadent dimension. You know, I won't lie, a climate like this makes me wish I was a migratory bird.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock and the Classic Malts lineup. Dennis Malcolm is still going strong at 77 years of age. He started working at Glen Grant at the age of 15, following in his father and grandfather's footsteps. This week he was in New York City for the premiere of the new Glen Grant 21-year-old single malt, and I decided to let you come up with most of the questions for our interview. I put the word out in the WhiskyCast community app and on Twitter and took your questions straight to the source. Of course, I had a few questions of my own for Dennis as well. First of all, let's start by talking about this new 21-year-old. Tell me about it.
Yeah, it's our latest expression and our oldest expression, and it's the gateway to many more expressions in the future, which we'll be able to share with you as they are being launched.
So there are older expressions coming?
This is our latest, oldest one, and it's not the end of the journey. It's just the start of the journey for us.
That was one of the questions one of the listeners had asked in the WhiskyCast community app was whether there were more older expressions coming along, and they didn't know about the 21-year-old. What makes this one so unique?
This one has got, unlike the 18-year-old, the 18-year-old was our oldest one before, and it was mainly bourbon wood, which give you much more floral notes to it. This one has got a high percentage of sherry. We're using all of our sherry butts, hoggies and barrels married together, and it's got this wonderful, rich, fruity notes to it.
Tell me about the process for creating a whiskey like this. What goes into creating it?
Well, what we're trying to do is keep the tradition and the DNA of Glen Grant and innovate at the same time. So we look at the profile of all our other expressions and try and be innovative with it and change them a little bit to create a different flavour profile. The aroma and the flavour, in my mind, has always got to be in harmony, irrespective of which one you're doing. So all we're doing is playing about with different casks to create different aromas and tastes, which we think is the right way to go.
How many trials did you go through before you settled on the final version?
There's quite a few sometimes. I've said in the past, my hair is getting greyer when we're doing it, because what you're doing is you're selecting the individual casks so that they all complement one another. They've got to be uniform and complement one another. You want them all to be blended well together, the casks.
On a different topic, in our last episode we talked about the distillery closings of 1983, which was the year we lost something like 14 distilleries because of the whiskey lock. Where were you in 1983 and what were you doing?
In 1983 I was at Glen Grant, still at Glen Grant. We didn't close down, we just reduced our production levels. We worked straight through it, So I was at Glen Grant, still at Glen Grant.
Because I knew you had left for a while in between 83, later years, right?
You've got the date right. It was 1979. I moved to Glenlivet, which was the same company, the Glenlivet Distillers, to be manager there. And then when the company was taken over by Seagram's, they moved everyone about, and I was asked to go back to Glen Grant. So I came back to Glen Grant in 83 to run Glen Grant in Capadonic.
What was it like back then in those days trying to deal with the whiskey lock?
Well, I think the industry coped with it very well indeed, because the bigger companies with the whiskey lock could have flooded the market to get rid of the surplus stocks and cheapened the brands as well. So they didn't do that. They held on to their stocks, cut back production and balanced it that way, which I think was a very, very good thing to do.
You were down to 2 days a week production then?
We were on 3-4 days a week, because at that time there was 9 distilleries in the group, so they were all on 3-4 days a week.
I want to ask you a few questions that our listeners have submitted in the WhiskyCast community app. Yeah. Let me pull it up here. Tyrone Cote asks from Canada, What's your favorite of the current standard bottlings and why? I'm betting it's the 21-year-old now.
Well, I can't really say I've got a favourite, because if you had a family with 2 or 3 kids and somebody asked you what your favourite was, that wouldn't be a good thing to do. So I think I like them for the strengths that they are at different times. So at this moment in time, the 21-year-old has got this wonderful, rich, fruity notes to it. But I like the 18, I like the 15, I like the 12 for different reasons. So I'm not a guy who says my latest is my favourite, because my latest is just the start of the journey for the next ones.
Doc Martin wants to know if there's any chance of going to 46% and no chill filtering and natural colour in these expressions.
The very latest one that we're launching today is 46% non-chill filtered. So he's reading my mind.
Will future expressions be at 46%?
I'm not really sure yet, because we try them at different percentages, 43, 40, 43, 40 for the UK and 43 for America and 46. But the stronger they get, the better mouthfeel you experience with it. So it all depends what we decide to do at the time.
How do you decide between 40, 43 and 46?
Well, 43 you need to chill filter it, because it's going to go cloudy with you. But 46 and upwards, there's no need to do that. So that makes it much easier for us. And the stronger you get, it's getting more closer to the natural whisky in the maturing in the warehouse.
Juan Cruz had a comment before his questions. First, a thanks to Glen Grant for the 12-year-old, a fantastic smooth dram at a great value. I even gave my best friend a bottle as one of his first scotches to try. And his first question is, what are you thinking regarding your future career-wise after 62 years now, I think?
I think
the job is safe.
I didn't say I was 62 years, and then to say someone's tracking me just now. Yeah, the thing is, it has never been classed as a job. It's just a way of life for me. I've been born into the industry, so I always say that the day that I waken up and I don't want to go and do this, that's the time I'll decide to give my notice and to retire. But I'm still loving every minute of it. And
it's been 62 years. I know that we just had a couple of years ago, the 60th anniversary release.
That's correct. It'll be 62 years in the industry on the 3rd of April this year. So it doesn't feel like that,
Juan's second question is any projects or new expressions you're looking forward to or working on. A 21-year-old would fall into that category, since we can't talk about anything future-related, right?
Yeah, that's right. The 21 here is amazingly different from the previous oldest expression, 18. So I'm focused on that today to let everyone taste it and understand it.
Juan's final question is, what does the future of the Glen Grant brand look like? Any significant goals for the brand that you're setting going forward?
I said earlier to you that the journey is just beginning. We've got a range now from the non-age Arbaralis right up to 21, and that is just the latest one. The journey is still continuing on this prestige and rare collection.
Willem Killian writes from South Africa, what's the oldest whiskey currently resting at the distillery? That's a question you get a lot, right?
Yeah. It's maybe 70 plus years, just over 70 years. Yeah.
So it would have been distilled about the time you came on board, or even a few years before?
No, before I came on board in 1961. And the 60-year-old we did launch last year. That was a parcel of casks that Douglas McKessick laid down, and he filled 2 or 3 of them to commemorate 150 years of distilling in 1990. So I was rock solid sure that it was going to be of good quality when it was 60, because it was really good at 30,
What about Glen Grant? And we've talked about this before. My take on Glen Grant is that it really doesn't start getting good until it's 20 years old. The whiskeys are good at 12 and 15 and 18, but they really start getting special after that 20-year point. What causes that, in your opinion?
Well, I'm a great believer that the cost of quality should not come into it at all, and we've always used casks 3 times at Glen Grant. So the younger ones are starting off with at a really high quality level. We don't use 4, 5 and 6 fills, so they're getting a great chance there. They're getting good flavours and colour from the wood, and it does help it going forward.
Another question now from Ian Bruce. In your 60 years, do you have any standout moments personally or for the industry in general? What stands out over that time period?
Well, for me, there's been a few changes, but two of the biggest ones that I take a great bit of pride in doing was back in 72, 73, we doubled the size of the distillery and kept the existing distillery running. And then when Campari took over in 2005, 2006, the world was our oyster. You know, they're committed behind the brand. They're positive, strong, solid behind it, and they've spent millions laying down stocks from 2006, 2005, 2006, right up to date. And it's amazing that they've invested so heavily in the company and in the people.
That was a question I was going to ask because we had a Twitter question. What's it like working for Campari?
Yeah, it's like working back. I said this to people just the other day there, the same question. I said, do you know when Campari took over? It was like working when it was Glen Grant with Major McKessick. It was a family concern, just a slightly bigger family. So I welcomed it with open arms.
Another question from Ian. Do you have a favorite rival distillery or dram? What do you drink when you're not drinking Glen Grant? Let's put it that way.
Oh, when I'm not drinking Glen Grant, I've got to say I drink tea. I can always access Glen Grant. You know, I've got plenty of Glen Grant at home. So it's not that I haven't tasted other single malts. So there's a lot of different single malts out there, good single malts. But my favourite is Glen Grant, you know.
Rothes is a town of several distilleries, but Ian wants to know if you can give us a feel on what a distillery like Glen Grant brings to these small Scottish towns. It was a lifeblood of the towns when I was younger, because back in 83 we had 82 employees between Glen Grant and Cappadonnach, and Glen Rothes had 50, 60 employees. It was a high employment industry because it all hand operated. You know, there's no forklifts and automation wasn't really thought about then, so it was still quite a lot of employment there. Then automation came in and reduced it quite a bit, which is good in a way as well. But Glen Grant has grown because it's not just producing and maturing, it's actually bottling on site as well. So since Campari took over, we went from 5 employees to existing now 27. So that creates a lot of jobs for a community, right?
It does, and it's not just the amount of jobs it creates in the distillery. When the industry is busy, all the distilleries are producing. The support industries like the coopers, like the farmers, like the transport. There's jobs in the community for everyone then.
As well as the jobs that the visitors industry creates too, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of visitors come to the distillery, so it creates temporary jobs for guides, and also the coppersmiths. You know, when you're running 24/7, busy like that, the copper wears quicker, so the coppersmiths are busy doing that as well, and they are big employers as well.
One last question from the community app. Mike's Whiskey Bunker wants to know your thoughts on the Scottish technical file. Is it too restrictive in terms of what you're allowed to do with Scotch whiskey?
Not an easy question to answer, because I think it's right that they insist that it's produced a standard, and everyone does it the same standard, and single malts especially are produced and bottled in Scotland. So maybe it could be restrictive for some new ones who want to experiment, you know, because they have stipulated what type of casks they should be using. But I think it's good to have a quality standard like that, you know, but he's right, it has to be reviewed from time to time.
Question I've got for you, with the gardens at Glen Grant that you're famous for, what's the most unusual wildlife you've seen running through the gardens?
Oh wow, we've got red squirrel there, we've got roe deer in there, quite a lot of roe deer, we have pheasants, you get not storks but craggy herons who, you know, they fish in the stream, so there's quite a lot of them there.
What's the best part about working at Glen Grant?
It's just like home. It's just like home. It's, the people, it's just like a big family. It's lovely there. It's absolutely lovely.
Thanks to Dennis Malcolm for answering your questions on this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. Let's begin with the new Glen Grant 21-year-old. It's bottled at 46% ABV and will retail for $360 a bottle. The nose has notes of peaches, toffee, apricots, fresh flowers, and just a hint of pears. The taste is fruity and vibrant with apples, peaches, a hint of citrus, creme brulee, vanilla beans, and dried flowers. The finish is long and fruity with a touch of tartness, and I'm scoring the Glen Grant 21-year-old a 95. Arizona's Whiskey Del Bach released its annual batch of Frontera single malt this weekend. It's finished in Spanish sherry casks and bottled at 48.5% ABV. The nose has notes of toffee, dark fruits, red grapes, and raisins. The taste has notes of vanilla pods, apricots, honey, and oak, and the finish is long with touches of stone fruits, honey, oak, and a hint of leather. I'm scoring Whiskey Del Bach's 2023 batch of Frontera a 93. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, our tasting notes are brought to you by Sagamore Spirit, a 200-time award-winning Maryland-style rye whiskey. With a determined focus to create the best rye whiskey imaginable, Sagamore's team of distillers crafts each spirit with a nod to both tradition and innovation. Find their signature, double oak, cask strength, or reserve series rye whiskeys, as well as their line of premium rye whiskey canned cocktails at a retailer near you. Just visit sagamorespirit.com/find-rye. Please drink responsibly. I had the chance to taste some French whiskeys the other day at Vin Expo in New York City, including the Villanova Roja single malt from Distillery Castan. It's matured in French red wine casks and bottled at 46% ABV, and the nose has gentle spices, dried fruits, cocoa powder, and vanilla. The taste is thick and chewy, with notes of red grapes, plums, raisins, and subtle spices. Those spices linger on the finish along with dark fruits, and I'm scoring Distillery Castan's Villanova Roja French single malt an 89. Finally, let's look at the new Green River Wheated Bourbon. I mentioned this one last time around during the news. It's bottled at 45% ABV, and the nose has touches of wheat bread, honey, butterscotch, vanilla, and a hint of linseed oil. The taste has notes of buttered popcorn, honey, dried fruits, butterscotch, and touches of peaches and apricots, while the finish is long with subtle spices and touches of butterscotch, peaches, and apricots. I'm scoring the Green River Wheated Bourbon a 91. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 3,400 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com.
Gabriel here again. Dewar's Master Blender Stephanie McLeod has been doing some amazing things with cask finishing lately, and Dewar's French Cask Smooth is no exception. It's the 5th edition to the Dewar's Cask Finishing Series. This 8-year whiskey is double-aged, then finished in Calvados casks to blend together the best of Scottish distilling and aging with the finest in French brandy maturation. The nose is sweet honey and citrus in perfect balance. Taste it, and you'll get this unmistakable note of baked apple, citrus, and a hint of cinnamon spice. Now, I recommend it this time of year as an apple cinnamon highball, using lemon juice, simple syrup, unfiltered apple juice, and club soda, or simply enjoy it on its own. Either way, it's a specially crafted reward for your curiosity.
Time now for our community segment, highlighting some of your comments in the WhiskyCast community app this week. We'll start with a club note from Lars Rogers in Red Deer, Alberta. Red Deer Whiskey Club had a great Irish tasting on March 23rd. The Sexton was a great value pick. The Bushmills 21 was a crowd favorite. The Redbreast 27 was incredible if money was no object. My personal favorite was the 2 Stacks Smoke and Mirrors Imperial PX. Stunning whiskey all around. He also posted a photo of the bottles from that tasting. Thank you for sharing, Lars. Tyrone Cote from Halifax, Nova Scotia posted this comment with a photo. I hope this is a trend. Our local shop just added a machine that allows you to purchase samples of a changing variety of whiskeys. The current list of whiskeys in that machine, Glendalough Double Barrel, the new Green Spot Quail's Gate, Basil Hayden Toast, and Maker's Mark 101. Now, this is something the wine folks have been doing for quite a while now. I'm glad to see it come to whiskey. We posted an update on the Kentucky barrel tax bill earlier this week in the app, and Matt posted this response. I'm all for tax breaks for startups. I question this decision, though, in light of big profits for big players. My concern is for the municipalities that rely on the revenue stream created from the tax on barrels. Well, that's a good point, Matt, and something that the authors of the bill tried to address. If it passes, the tax would be phased out gradually between 2026 and 2039 to give local governments time to prepare for it. There are also provisions in the bill for the state to make up any local tax revenue that's lost once the tax is phased out. And Darth Splotch posted a question in the app. Anyone know of a whiskey club in the northwestern suburbs of Chicago, looking to taste whiskey with some new friends? We have a list of clubs in the app and at the website, but unfortunately, nothing in the Chicago area. If you know of a club, use the contact form at whiskycast.com to let us know, and we'll pass the details on. Or, better yet, download the WhiskyCast community app and post the answer yourself. Of course, you can still get in touch with us the old-fashioned way on social media. Look for WhiskyCast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Or the even more old-fashioned way, you can just email us. The address is comments@whiskycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Writer's Tears. No one is still quite sure how the interaction between whiskey and wood works. We know most of it, but there are still a few mysteries that keep whiskey from coming out consistently from barrel to barrel. Now a team of researchers from Scotland's Heriot-Watt University are hoping to solve some of those mysteries once and for all. They're working with Diageo on a 3-year-long project to create a data science platform that will demystify the maturation process. The team includes brewing and distilling experts, along with chemists, physicists, and experts in machine learning and data science. Their goal is to develop a new machine learning tool that uses data to make sure barrels are selected for the right amount of time to produce the right flavor characteristics in a specific whiskey. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just use the contact form at whiskycast.com to get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copper Pot, an 18th century style of premium Irish whiskey, blended from single pot still and single malt. Like yourself, it's one of life's treasured rarities, and what's rare is wonderful. Writer's Tears Copper Pot.
That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of all of our past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the brand new WhiskyCast community app. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Small batch. How would you describe it? It's like an Irishman's understanding of baseball. Extremely limited.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Friends, it's me again, reminding you to try Dewar's French Cask Smooth Blended Scotch Whiskey. The best of 2 cultures and traditions in one beautiful bottle. Please drink responsibly.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2023. and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.